Hey there, it's the first week of February 2026. That means it's time for the monthly Cape Coral real estate market update video. I do one of these every single month. We're going to take a look at kind of an overview of what the market's doing right now. We're mostly going to be looking at some statistics and facts and figures that were put up last month. So we're going to be talking about January 2026's numbers. I'll give you an overview of the entire market, and then we'll really start to dive deep into some different categories here. We're going to talk about non-waterfront single-family homes. We're, of course, going to talk about Gulf access homes. We're going to also talk about condos and townhomes, and then we'll wrap things up with vacant residential lots. And I'm also going to finish this video with some advice if maybe you're a buyer in the Cape Coral real estate market, as well as some advice if maybe you're a seller in the Cape Coral real estate market. So a lot of really great information in this video. I promise if you watch the whole thing, you're going to know more than 99% of the other buyers and sellers out there, and quite honestly, probably 99% more than the realtors in this town right now. So make sure you stick around. I've got some chapters down there in the video timeline that you can bounce around if you're looking for something specific. And of course, if you're not familiar with who I am, my name is Dustin Guthrie. I've been a full-time real estate broker here in Cape Coral for almost 20 years now. I live here with my wife and our 3 little kids. Do one of these videos every single month, and these are a little bit drier videos, but a lot of really great information in these. But these are in addition to just the weekly videos I put out on this channel every single week. So we sometimes we're looking at really fun real estate like we did last week. Sometimes we're just covering really useful information, things like flood insurance, maybe some new construction developments coming to the area, maybe something about the utilities and the assessments. So a lot of really great information in these videos. And if you are interested in Cape Coral or Southwest Florida, maybe you're moving to Cape Coral or moving to Fort Myers or something, or even if you live here now and you just kind of want to keep up to speed on everything, make sure you hit the subscribe button so you can be around for these videos every week. Hit that notification bell as well so you can be notified whenever one of these videos hits the channel. And yeah, I think you'll get a lot of really great useful information, and I would love to have you around for it. But with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into this real estate market report. I always do. Every single one of these I start off with the lowest sales just for fun. We're going to look at the lowest sales of the month and the highest sales of the month for the entire city of Cape Coral. So let's start off with the lowest sales of the month for the whole city of Cape Coral. All right, so let's check out the lowest sales of the month of January 2026 for the entire city of Cape Coral. We're going to look, as we always do, at a couple of different categories. Let's start off with the lowest overall residential sale, and that would be the category of condos. Of course, condos, we've seen prices go down on condos quite a bit, more than any other category over the last 2 or 3 years. And as a result, we're seeing some really low condo sales, and there's a lot of opportunities, frankly, in the condo market right now. But let's take a look at the lowest condo that sold last month. That was this one right here, 608 Southeast 6th Street, unit number F. That's in the Coral K condo apartments over there. It's right in that little duplex community there by Cultural Park, just off of Hancock Bridge Parkway. And this was a decent unit, quite honestly. This was a little 1-bedroom, 1-bath, so it was smaller, just under 600 square feet, built in 1981. But for all intents and purposes, it looked like pretty clean. It had some decent updates in it, maybe an enclosed patio on the back. But this thing was listed at $91,000, and it sold just in 7 days for full price, $91,000. The buyer bought it with a conventional loan. That was the only under $100,000 sale for condos that we saw this past month. Previous months we'd seen 2 or 3 of these dip under that $100,000 mark. So there are some opportunities out there to get a really cheap condo. And like I said, this one wasn't too bad at all. Probably needed a few things in there that we can't see in the pictures, but nevertheless, seems to be a pretty clean and decent unit. The fees were low in there. It was only $280 a month for the fees in there. I think this was just maybe a little bit smaller condo, 1-bedroom, 1-bath, just under 600 square feet. So congrats to the buyers on picking up a really decent condo for a fair amount under $100,000. $91,000 was the lowest condo sale last month. Let's jump over to the lowest single-family home sale. Lowest single-family home sale. We've seen a few of these get under the $200,000 mark recently, and actually there were 5 this month that got under that $200,000 mark. And the lowest one was this one right here. It was well under 200,000. This one, 1196 Pine Lake Drive there in Cape Coral. That's in the Pondella Heights neighborhood. It's just off of Pondella by that industrial park over there south of Pine Island Road. And this one was listed at $145,000. It was a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, 1960 built little cracker box concrete block house with a didn't have a garage. It had a carport over there, like a lot of those did back in 1960. Just over 1,000 square feet. Needed some things in there, and some new flooring certainly. I don't think this property had central AC. It had some wall units. Did have a newer roof, just a smaller and really older property over there. And again, it was listed at $145,000, sold in 25 days for $130,000 cash. And that was by far the lowest sale that we saw for single-family homes last month in the entire city of Cape Coral. Certainly congratulations to the buyers on picking up a single-family home for $130,000. I think that's the lowest one we've seen in quite a few months, beyond just some things that maybe had some fire damage or something like that. This one looked to be in relatively good shape. It was just old and pretty small on a pretty small lot over there in the Pondella Heights neighborhood. So congrats to the buyers on that. $130,000 cash was the lowest single-family home sale last month. Let's do a fun one. And that's, we're well known for our Gulf access homes here in the city of Cape Coral. So let's see what the lowest Gulf access home that sold last month was. That was this one in the Southeast Cape, 3106 Southeast 18th Place. This one's just off Cornwallis to the east of Del Prado. This is actually direct Gulf access. So this is really top-notch waterfront over there. This home was listed at $389,000. It's a little 2-bedroom, 2-bath, just over 1,000 square feet, so not very big whatsoever. Built in 1968. And this, like I said, this home was listed at $389,000, and it ended up selling in just over a month for $325,000. I'm sure they probably found a few things wrong with it in the inspection. With this being an older property, it had a really old roof on it, and that roof definitely needed to be replaced. They probably couldn't obtain reasonable insurance without replacing that roof. But overall, it was clean inside. It had impact windows and doors, hurricane impact windows and doors, which is a nice upgrade on here. Certainly needed some repairs, but the biggest thing about those 1960s properties on these direct Gulf access canals is just the flood insurance is usually pretty darn high on these things. So unless you can find an older policy that maybe a seller had prior to the big change in 2021 that was made with our flood insurance here, I'm sure the flood insurance there was pretty expensive. And this one was bought with a conventional loan at $325,000, so they would have been required, those buyers would have been required to get an insurance policy, a flood insurance policy on this, and I'm sure it was probably pretty pricey. And that may be why this property was the lowest priced Gulf access home that sold last month, $325,000, and this was the only one that sold under $400,000. We've usually seen one or two get under that $400,000 mark, but this past month there was only one, and $325,000 was the lowest priced Gulf access home that sold last month, excuse me. And so that wraps it up for the lowest sales of the month. Let's get over to the fun ones. Let's look at the highest sales of the month of January for the entire city of Cape Coral. Okay, highest sales of the month of January 2026 for the entire city of Cape Coral. We'll do some similar categories here. We'll start off with the highest condo sale this past month. This was a really a nice condo sale this past month. Highest condo sale was at 4235 Southeast 20th Place. That's unit A505. That's in Paradise Point. We don't see too many of these properties come available. And this was the penthouse unit. This was the top floor unit there on the corner. This overlooks the Caloosahatchee River. Beautiful, amazing wide water views. And these penthouse units there in Paradise Point are enormous. Just under 4,400 square feet of living area. 3 bedrooms with a den. 3 and 1/2 baths. These towers were built in 2001. So they're somewhat newer as far as condos go. A lot of the condos that we see in the city are a little bit older. Maybe built in the 1970s. This one was built in 2001, but this is an incredible unit. It had some open patios there on the top floor overlooking the Caloosahatchee River. It was sold fully furnished. It was listed at $1.5999999. $1.6 million basically is what the list price was. And it was on the market for a while. 313 days it sat there before it finally sold for $1.25 million. So well north of $1 million for this penthouse unit in Paradise Point. And usually, you know, we've seen a few $1 million+ condo sales the last 12 months or so, but they've all been in Tarpon Point down there in the southwest section of Cape Coral. Really nice high-rise towers there in the southwest. And this is the first time we've seen one from Paradise Point transfer in a while. And $1.25 million was the highest condo sale. This is just a really beautiful property. Had a beautiful kitchen, roll-down shutters everywhere, gigantic walk-in pantry, closet organizers. It did come with a deeded Gulf access boat slip there. Had great amenities over there at Paradise Point. So certainly congrats to the buyers and the sellers on this incredible sale. $1.25 million was the highest condo sale for the month of January 2026. Okay, let's take a look at the highest non-Gulf access home sale for the last month. As you can imagine, the highest sale every month is almost always going to be a Gulf access home. Those Gulf access properties are just much more valuable than non-waterfront or freshwater front or something that's not that doesn't have access out to the Gulf. So let's look at the highest non-Gulf access home. That's this one right here, 3726 Southwest 1st Street. This has a southwest address, but this is really the northwest neighborhood. This is west of Burnt Store Road, just off of Embers Parkway there, north of Pine Island Road. So this house is a brand new construction custom home, and unfortunately they don't have any pictures in here beyond the external ones, so you can't see what this looked like inside, but I can imagine from the description that it had a lot of really nice upgrades in it. It was, again, a custom home, brand new construction, never been lived in, 2,416 square feet, 4 bedrooms, 3 baths. Was listed at $825,000. It sold the day it came on the market for $822,85. So it looked like this one maybe sold before it was finished and before they had some professional interior photos get done in there. But this is in an area of the Northwest Cape that actually has central water and sewer already in place. So it's a nice neighborhood for sure. And there's a lot of Gulf access homes around this neighborhood. So a lot of higher end homes in this community right here, but $820,285 for a brand new construction custom home that was not on a body of water at all. It wasn't even on a freshwater canal. So congrats to the buyers on purchasing that beautiful, beautiful home. But let's get over to the fun one. That's the highest overall sale for the month of January 2026. This is a Gulf access home. In fact, this one's right on the river. Let's take a look at this one. 614 Coral Drive, 614 Coral Drive there. It's in the Yacht Club neighborhood of the southeast section of Cape Coral. It's just looking right to the south over Redfish Cove there. So incredible views on this riverfront property. This is a pretty big house, 4,511 square feet. It was built in 2012, so it's not really old, but it's not brand new either. 5 bedrooms, 4.5 baths. It was listed at $3.475 million. On the market for well over a year, 476 days. Finally sold there at the beginning of January for $3.3 million. And that was a cash sale, actually, $3.3 million cash sale. But really just an incredible property. 3-car garage. It had a new tile roof on it. It was sold completely furnished. It's completely updated inside. Had one of the biggest kitchens I've seen in a long time, and it actually had one of the most incredible outdoor kitchens I've seen. It was a covered outdoor kitchen with a fireplace, negative edge pool looking out over the river there, a massive boat dock and lift on the outdoor spaces out there. So just a really, really incredible property. And actually, this is one of 2 properties that sold last month for north of $3 million. We hadn't seen a $3+ million sale in probably the last 6 months. I anticipate we'll probably see a few more of those 3 and maybe even $4+ million sales as we get into this main season of the winter and spring, when a lot more of these higher end properties transfer. So great to see these $3+ million sales. But again, beautiful riverfront home, $3.3 million was the highest sale overall for the month of January in the entire city of Cape Coral. Congrats to the buyers and the sellers on that. All right, that wraps up the highest and lowest sales of the month. So let's dive into the statistics portion of this video. We're going to start off, as we always do, with kind of an overview of the broad total market. We'll look at those numbers and then we'll really start to dive in and break things down into some different categories. So let's get started with the overall market. Okay, so again, this is going to be statistics for the entire market. So these numbers include everything from that little $91,000 condo that we saw all the way up to that $3.3 million sale. Basically anything that's a residential property. We're not talking about vacant lots or commercial or anything like that. But let's start off with the total number of sales this past month. This chart goes back 2 years. We had 340 overall sales in the residential Cape Coral real estate market last month. And January, as you can kind of tell in this chart, is always one of the lowest months, if not the lowest month of the year. And the reason for that is, sales happen, generally speaking, they happen 30 to 45 days after a buyer contracts initially on the property. So we're talking about sales that occurred from properties that were put under contract back in December. And if you're familiar with this channel and watch these videos before, you know that December is notoriously slow and people aren't generally shopping for real estate during the holidays. They're busy doing things with family, they're traveling, they're doing all those things. They're not actively out looking at properties too much in the month of December. So as a result, we don't see very many closings happen in January. That'll spike up really, really quick as we get into February and March. But 340 sales this past month, that's down from December's closings of 461, so down significantly. But again, you got to kind of look at what January's looked like the last couple of years. If we go back to January of 2025, we only sold 306 properties. And if you go back to January of 2024, we sold 309. So we're actually doing 30, 35 more sales this January than we did the last 2 January. So we're not doing too bad at 340. Again, I think that's going to completely jump up as we get into the main kind of bulk of our season. Generally speaking, the highest sales that we see are usually March, April, May, somewhere around there. So we'll see these numbers tick up and probably get close to doubling as we get into the later months of the spring. So 340 sales last month. Let's take a look at the median price. And again, this median price, this chart covers the past 2 years. The median price takes into consideration everything. So everything from that lowest sale all the way up to the highest. The one right in the middle is our median price. Here's the chart going back 2 years. Median price last month, $350,000. This for the total residential Cape Coral real estate market. That's down slightly from December's number of 361.7. But if you kind of read between the lines here, we can see a gradual decline over the course of the last 2 years, but really the last 6 months have been very, very flat. And case in point, the median price for July of 2025, that was 7 months ago, was $350,000. So it went up a little bit and then came back down. I think we can safely say that pricing has been overall pretty darn flat for the last 6 or 7 months, right around that $350,000 mark. If you just want to take that $350,000 and compare it to the last 2 Januaries, January 2025, the median price was $365,000. So we're down about $15,000 or about 4.1% from where we were this time last year. If you take it back 2 years ago to January 2024, we were above 400. We were at 408,500, $408,500. So we're down a full $58,500 from where we were 2 years ago. That represents a price decline of about 14.3%. I think you kind of have to read between the lines a little bit, but I think that 14.3% over the last 2 years is pretty darn accurate. I think overall as a real estate market, our prices have corrected somewhere between 12 and 15% in the last 2 years. And it really seems like that's kind of slowing down or flattening off. Like I said, in the last 7 months, we've been very, very flat, 350 to basically 372.5. We ticked up to 372.5 in October and come back down. But again, this fluctuates a little bit, but overall, I'd say for the last 7 months, we've been pretty flat on the pricing side. And that really has a lot to do with our inventory numbers. And let's talk about those because, early last year, a year ago when I was doing this report, we were talking about really being shocked at the level of inventory. We had a huge spike in inventory from December to January, and numbers were really getting out of control. There were way too many properties on the market, and that's why we saw a lot of the price reductions that we did. Not so much this year. The last, really since the summer, inventory has gone down tremendously, and we did spike up this past month, as we always do, from December to January, just as we get into more the more active season of the first 6 months of the year, we always see more properties come on the market, no matter what the conditions of the market are. So, but let's take a look at this chart. Again, this is going back to January of 2024. We had a total number of actives on the market at some point during the month of January of 3832. That doesn't mean there were that many properties actively on the market at one time. Some of those properties sold, some of them went off the market, some of them expired, but their total number of actives added up over the entire month was 3832, and that's up from December's number of 3524. But look, this chart, you can tell, I mean, we always get a big spike in January. I was expecting that, and usually that increase in inventory starts to happen in November, December. It didn't happen for us this year. Those inventory numbers actually decreased going into October, November, December, and now they've picked up a little bit, as you know, as we predicted. We said on previous market reports that was going to happen, but it didn't happen that much. You know, the fact that the December to January spike this year, from December to January 2026, we only increased by 308 properties. That's about an 8.7% increase. If you look back at the December to January increases for the last 2 years, December 2024 to January 2025, that spike was 584 properties, and that made up 14.2% increase in just the 1 month. And the previous year, from 2023 to 2024, that number from December to January was 541, and that was an increase of 15.6%. So we're almost half as much of an increase as the last couple of years from December to January. I think that's a really important point that's going to be brought up a lot in this market report as we get into these other categories. But let's just compare the numbers, 3832 to the last couple of Januaries. January of 2025, we had 4,703 properties on the market. So we've taken 871 properties in total. In spite of that, you know, December to January spike, we're still down 18.5% from where we were this time last year. So almost 1 in 5 properties have been taken off the market in the last year. And I think that's a really, really good sign for the health of our overall real estate market. Those inventory numbers last year were just really, really high. And it looks like we are on the other side of this. And even if you go back to January of 2024, the total number of actives on the market back then was 4,012. So we're still down 180 properties, or about 4.5% from where we were in January of 2024. So it looks, for all intents and purposes, all signs, all statistics are pointing that we are rounding the corner on this real estate market. The inventory numbers are flattening out. The pricing has flattened out over the last 6 or 7 months. And it seems like we're going to round the corner here and start to head in the other direction before too long. So really good inventory numbers for the health of this real estate market. They're not as good as you'd like to see them if you were a buyer, but buyers have kind of been in control of this market for the last couple of years, and they're still very much in control, and we'll get into that. But for all intents and purposes, it looks like we're rounding the corner on this real estate market. So a couple other just brief statistics I want to bring up because I think they're important. The overall closed price to list price ratio was, for the entire market, was 97.2%. So in spite of where a lot of people will watch these YouTube videos, you've seen some doom and gloom, some clickbaity, frankly, YouTube videos talking about how, oh, there's so many, you know, the sellers are taking anything out there. That's not really the case. The average property is still selling for about 97.2% of the list price. If a property is listed at $100,000, you can expect that property on average to sell for $97,200. So we're not seeing these big discounts off of these list prices. Now, that doesn't take into consideration maybe they had to reduce that list price several times. So maybe if you're out there and they're overpriced, they had to reduce that list price 10, 12, 30, 40 grand before they got it priced right and they actually got it sold. But once they sold it, that final list price, they got roughly on average 97.2% out of it. So I think that's an important statistic to keep in mind as you're shopping out there. We're not seeing any large number of, 10, 12% discounts off these list prices. If you're looking at a property that's priced right, the buyers out there are willing to buy that property for pretty darn close to list price, as long as it's priced right. If it's not priced right, you probably shouldn't be looking at it anyway. But nevertheless, I thought that was important. The median days to sell these properties right now are about 42, and that's actually down. It was closer to 60 there for a while. So in other words, if you put a property on the market, how long does it take on average to sell that property? Well, if it's priced right, it's selling on an average of about 42 days. It was closer, again, to 60. But these properties are selling a little bit closer now. I think these sellers are kind of getting through their heads that they need to get these properties priced accurately. And once that happens, they're selling, a little bit over a month. So I thought that was a good statistic to see. And we'll keep an eye on that as we get into these later months of our main season here of the winter and spring. All right, that wraps it up for the overall statistics in the overall market. Let's start to break these down into categories. And we're going to start off with the biggest category we've got here in the city of Cape Coral, and that's non-waterfront single-family homes. Let's get into that. Okay, off-water single-family homes, non-waterfront homes. These are homes that, just like it sounds, they're not on a body of water. They're not on a freshwater canal. They're not on a Gulf access canal. They're not on a lake or anything like that. This makes up the majority of our market here. Again, how many sales we had last month? We had 340 total sales last month. 176 of those were off-water single-family home sales. So let's take a look at the chart again, going back 2 years. And again, you can see it. I mean, the number really fell off in January. 176. As I mentioned in this in the previous segment, January is notoriously slow for closings. We don't have a lot of people shopping for real estate in December during the holidays. So as a result, we don't have very many closings in the following month. And that 176 is down from December's closings of 260 in this category. But if you want to compare it to the last couple of Januaries, last year in January 2025, we had 202 sales in this category. In January of 2024, we only had 188. So we are less than the previous 2 Januaries. But once again, I fully anticipate those numbers to go up as we get into our closer, the main season that we have. And if you go to March last year, we went from 202 closings in January to 373 in March, so just 2 months later. So we'll see these numbers pick up in a big, big way. I don't think there's anything in the way of a trend here. We're just at the slowest point of the year. 2024, same way, 188 sales in January. By March, we had 384 sales that month. So notoriously slow month, but 176 total non-waterfront single-family homes sold last month. Let's check out the median price. This is pretty interesting. Median price for those 176 sales for off-water single-family homes was $319,650. That is the low point on this 2-year chart. Check it out. It's down from December's numbers. December's number was 335. Some of this may be just because we didn't sell as many homes. 176 was our sample size versus 260 plus the previous month. So that could be part of the reason that it took a dip there. We'll just have to wait until we see the next couple of months here. But if you look at the overall context of this chart, you can tell we've had a gradual decline like most categories for the last 2 years. And January of 2025, we were at 345,250. So we're down 25,600 just in the last 12 months. That represents a decline of about 7.4%. If you go back to January 2024, the median price there was $380,000. So we went from 380 years ago down to under 320 this past month. That represents a decline of $60,350, or just under 16% in the last 2 years. I think you have to read between the lines a little bit on this because, again, as you can tell from month to month, we spike up and down just a little bit. But I think if you averaged all these numbers out, I think the overall correction that we've had in this market over the last 2 years is somewhere between 12 and 15%. I think that's what it would average out to. So you take the same property on the same lot 2 years ago, you can expect that property would probably sell for 15% more than it does right now here in February 2026. So we'll just have to see if that number spikes back up. I anticipate that it probably will. We'll probably, like I said, the overall market has been very flat for the last 7 months, so we'll probably see some coming months where we're going to get back up into the 330s, maybe even the 340s, because again, I think the inventory levels have come down to the point where prices should start to flatten off as long as demand remains relatively high, and it is. But let's take a look at those inventory numbers. Again, these are the total number of active listings that were on the market at some point during the month, all added together. So it doesn't mean there were this many properties on the market at any given time. It just means some of them sold, some of them came off the market, this and that. But the total number of actives on the market last month for this category, 2,082. And again, that's a pretty big spike from December to January. But really not compared to the last couple of years. So we had 2,082 properties on the market at some point during the month of January 2026. That's up from 1,912 that were on the market in December. If you go back to January 2025, again, 12 months ago, we had 2,576 actives on the market. So we've taken just under 500 properties, 494 properties off the market in this category just in the last 12 months. That's 19.2%. So we've made significant progress in spite of that little spike that we just saw from December to January, which again, we see all the time in every year in every market. We've taken 19.2% off the market from where we were last year. If you look back 2 years ago, 2,269 properties on the market in January 2024. So we're still down 187 properties, or 8.2% from where we were 2 years ago. So significant progress. Even that spike from this year, from December to January, we added 170 properties to the overall market, about 8.9% increase from December to January this year. If you look at December to January from 2024 to 2025, that number was 263. So we added just in that month 11.4%, and even worse numbers back in December to January from 2023 to 2024, we had added 293 properties, or about 14.8%. So we're doing better this year than we have the last couple of years, and I think that's pretty significant. Even in this category, I think this category of off-water single-family homes, I think this one is struggling a little bit more than some of the other categories, and I think that's really comes down to the K-shaped economy that we're in right now. I think a lot of the higher-end properties are selling a little easier. Folks that are retirement age that have a lot in assets and stocks and investments and things like that, they're able to buy these properties a little easier in those categories, those upper-end categories, versus these properties, which are predominantly purchased by people that are getting a loan. So you're buying a payment essentially instead of a price point. And I think that's why the pricing has been a little bit sluggish, and the reduction in inventory is not as much as we've seen in some of the other categories. It's just taken a little bit longer to sell these properties. But nevertheless, that wraps it up for off-water single-family homes. Let's get over to everybody's favorite category, and that's Gulf access homes. Let's take a look at those. All right, Gulf access homes. What do I mean by Gulf access homes? Well, we're really well known for Gulf access homes here in the city of Cape Coral. I'm just basically talking about any single-family home that's on a body of water where you have access by boat out to the Gulf of America, or the Gulf of Mexico, whatever you want to call it. I get crap in the comments for calling it either thing, but nevertheless, with access out to that body of water, and it's usually a canal property. We've got hundreds of miles of canals here in the city of Cape Coral, and so our Gulf access real estate is a big point of pride for us here in the city of Cape Coral. And Gulf access over the last year has been doing really, really well, even compared to the previous couple of years. We've seen a lot of Gulf access homes sell, but let's take a look at the number of sales this past month. Here's the chart again. This time I took it back to December of 2023 just so you could see some context there, but we had 69 Gulf access homes sell in the month of January, and that's down from 89 in December. But again, January is notoriously slow for closings. If you want to kind of compare this to the last two Januaries, January 2025 we only sold 42 Gulf access homes. January 2024 we only sold 61. So we're doing a fair amount better than the last couple of Januaries. And again, I fully expect these number of sales to spike as we get into the bigger meat of our main season, especially for Gulf access homes. As you can imagine, a lot of these Gulf access homes are purchased by folks that are buying it as a second home or a retirement home or something like that, folks that spend the more time down here during the winter and spring, and then maybe they go back up north for summer. So there's just more of these buyers in this market in the first 6 months of the year, every year, no matter what the market looks like. So as a result, most of our sales happen in the first 6 months. And in fact, in the last 2 years, the high number on this chart has been May. So as we get into the later spring months, we'll probably see these sales go up, those monthly sales go up in excess of 100. Last May, in May 2025, there was 103 of these sales. May of 2024, there was 110. So I fully expect to see these go up. I think it's worth mentioning that we sold more Gulf Access homes last year in 2025 than we did in 2024 or 2023. So this particular category, at least in terms of the activity, the overall demand, it's been one of the strongest this past year. We're seeing a lot more people buy Gulf Access homes than previous years. It's not a huge difference, but it's a noticeable and worth mentioning difference in terms of the number of sales that we saw in this category last year versus 2024 and 2023. But let's look at the median price in this. So again, we don't have a big sample size, 69 properties. So month to month, these numbers are going to jump up and down quite a bit depending on maybe there was a few more expensive properties sold in the Southwest one month and a few more older, less expensive homes sell in the Southeast in another month. But let's just take a look at this chart. The total median price for those 69 sales last month was $707,500. That's down from December's number of $770. But again, this bounces up and down from month to month. We're not talking about a huge number of properties, so there's not a lot of consistency there. You kind of have to read between the lines and average these out a little bit. But let's just take that number at face value, $707,500. If we want to look at the median price from January of 2020, January 2025, that number was $765. So we're down about $57,500 just on those surface numbers. It represents a reduction of about 7.5% in the overall pricing. If we take it back to January of 2024, that number was $775. So again, I think the price has corrected more from 2024 to 2025, but this graph is just showing those numbers correcting about $10,000, which is not significant. I think, again, you got to kind of read between the lines here. But just in that number, if we took 775 to this past month of 707,500, represents a 2-year reduction of 8.7% or $67,500. I think the real average Gulf Access home right now, the average price should usually land somewhere in the mid 600s. I think we're around 650. Again, I think these spikes up to 770 and 707,500. I think that's more of a function of a few more expensive sales selling in one month versus another month. It'll probably come back down and we'll see something in the mid to upper 600s in the next couple of months. So if you averaged all these out, what does the real correction look like over the last 2 years? Again, I think in this category, we've probably corrected about 12 to 15%. I think it's pretty consistent with the off-water homes. So the average house, 2 years ago, the same house, same lot, is going to sell for about 15% less now than it did in January of 2023 or 2024, excuse me. So median price $707,500. Again, let's look at the inventory because same situation here, although the inventory kind of flattened out at the end of last year. Total number of active Gulf Access homes on the market this past month, 772. 772, that's up from December's number of 723, but it's been, as you can tell in this chart, pretty darn flat for the last 6 or so months. We came down quite a bit last summer, and then we kind of flattened out in the last 6 months, and now we're seeing this little bump up as we always do from December to January, but the numbers are still better than what they were the last couple of years. January of 2025, we had over 1,000 of these properties on the market, 1,010 properties on the market last year. So we've taken 283 properties off the market, 23.6% just in 12 months. That's pretty significant, and especially when you consider the majority of that reduction in inventory happened, basically at the start of last summer. Towards the end of the spring into last summer, a lot of those properties were taken off the market. But if we look back to January 2024, this number was 859. So we're still down 87 properties or 10.1% from where we were in January of 2024. And there wasn't a lot of talk about having an inventory issue back in January 2024. We certainly didn't see the numbers that we saw this past year, and now we're back under where we were 2 years ago. So I think that's pretty significant. Again, let's look, because I'm making a big deal out of this December to January bump, because I think it's pertinent to my case that we're kind of rounding the corner on this real estate market cycle right now. But the December to January bump for this year, from December 2025 to January 2026, that bump was 49 properties. It represented an increase in inventory over that month of about 6.3%. If you look back the previous 2 years from that December to January mark, December to 2024 to January 2025, that increase was 141 properties, or 16.2%. And the bump that we saw from December 2023 to January 2024 was 136, which was 18.8% at that point. So, we're talking a third. The bump that we saw this year was a third of what it was 2 years ago. And I think that's really significant. I think that's something that maybe is flying under a lot of people's radar, and I think it's a more of an important statistic and more of an indication that we've really kind of rounded the corner here on our inventory issues. And I think these pricing, as a result, are kind of flattening out as we slowly kind of turn this aircraft carrier of this real estate market around. And it's a really good sign for sellers out there if you can hang on another year or so. I think these prices will more than likely start to increase here in the next 12 months, although probably not sharply, at least not yet. But that remains to be seen. There's a lot of variables that could happen, like property tax, relief and all that kind of stuff, and we can talk about that later on in the video. But that wraps it up for Gulf Access Homes. I did want to just touch on freshwater before I move on. I know there's a lot of folks that watch this channel that are interested in freshwater properties. Those are mostly canal properties that are on a freshwater system. So it doesn't get access out to the open Gulf, but you do have little lakes and things like that you can get to, and they're usually a lot cheaper than the Gulf Access homes. But just to go through those numbers really quick, we did sell 51 of those properties last month. 51 freshwater property sales in January at a median price of $400,000, and our total inventory on the market right now for those freshwater homes is $476,000. So I did just want to briefly mention that before we moved on to condos and townhomes. So let's take a look at the condos and townhomes now. Condos and townhomes have, more than any other category, they've had the roughest go in this particular market cycle, this buyer's market. So let's get into those numbers. All right, condos and townhomes. For this category, I kind of lump everything together. So these are on the water, they're off the water. There's not too many condos that usually sell in any given month, so we're kind of opening the category up a little bit. And this category is very much like Gulf Access Homes. It's very heavily favored by our seasonal residents, by retirees and things like that, people spending maybe half the year or a few months of the year down here, and maybe they have a primary residence up north somewhere. So we see a lot more sales happen in the first 6 months versus the summer and the fall. And basically just like Gulf Access. But let's take a look at the total number of sales this past month. We had a pretty good January for condos, at least compared to the last couple of years. Take a look at this chart. Again, this goes back all the way to December of 2023 is the first bar on this graph, but we sold 44 condos last month. That's down from December's number of 49. But compared to the last couple of years, it's pretty darn good. Last January, we only sold 36. So January 2025, we only sold 36 condos. January 2024, we only sold 27. So we're pretty close to doubling the number of condos, at least January of this year versus January of 2024. But again, I fully expect that number to go up as we get into the later months of the season. Typically speaking, March, April, or May is usually the high point in terms of the total number of condo sales that we get every month. But let's take a look at the median price. Again, this category, we've seen a larger price decrease for the last 2 or 3 years than any other category that we have here in the city of Cape Coral. Median price for those 44 sales last month was under $200,000. $195,000 was the median price. That's down from December's number of $225,000. Again, we don't have a terrifically large sample size even in the months that we're selling a lot of condos. So this median price number is going to bounce up and down. You're going to have a few more months where you're selling condos like that one that we saw that sold for, $1.25 million. And obviously that's going to drag the median price up a little bit, but $195,000 was the median price for January 2026. If you take it back to January 2025, that number was $262,000. So we're down $67,000, or about 25.6%, just on those surface numbers. If you go back to January of 2024, the median condo price was $282,000. So we're down $87,000 from January of 2 years ago, and that's a decrease of about 30.9%. So once again, just like the Gulf Access, we kind of have to read between the lines on this a little bit. We've got to average these numbers out in order to kind of get an idea of what the actual real correction we've seen in the last couple of years, but it's still more than any other category. And I think even if you average these numbers out and you kind of, reduce some of these spikes and bring up some of these low months, I think, the real correction over the last year has been probably around 18%. And the real correction over the course of 2 years has been probably 25, 28%. So when you take that in comparison to the off-water single-family homes, where we've maybe had a 2-year correction of 15%, now you're talking about basically over 10% more than that in this category. I think the entire reason for that has just been, we had some changes recently. Obviously, insurance is a little more expensive. These HOA fees have gone up in a lot of these communities over the course of the last 2 or 3 years, and particularly the clientele that we see a lot buy condos are retirees. Maybe they're on fixed income. A lot of those folks had maybe been priced out of where they're comfortable in terms of those monthly HOA fees, and so they've decided to sell, and they've really seen themselves more as a forced seller. So because condo demand has not been particularly high the last couple of years, they've had to get a little more aggressive on their pricing in order to get these condos sold, and I think that's entirely the reason why we're seeing a larger reduction in overall prices for condos versus some of these other categories. But again, I think the real correction has happened 25, 28% or so over the last 2 years. I think majority of that, probably around 15 to 18%, has been just in the last 12 months. It's kind of the rubber's kind of really met the road here in the last 12 months, and these sellers have figured it out that they really are going to have to get aggressive on their pricing to sell these condos. But let's take a look at the inventory. A little bit different in the condo inventory versus the other categories too. So take a look at this chart again, going back December 2023. We had total number of actives on the market, active condos on the market last month, 506. That's up from 450. So we saw a little bit bigger spike in condos from December to January this year versus these other categories once again. But let's just take that 506 number and compare it to the last couple of years. Last January, we had 555 condos on the market. So we're still doing better than we were at last year. We've got 49 less on the market this year than last year. That represents a reduction of inventory of about 8.8%. But if you take it back 2 years ago, January of 2024, we only had 485. So we've got 20 more on the market now than we did this time 2 years ago. Represents about a 4.1% increase in inventory and condo inventory from the last 2 years. So pretty much bigger spike from December to January. We added 56 condos to the market this year from December to January. That represents an increase in inventory of about 12.4%. If you take that back to the last couple of years, in December of 2024 to January 2025, we added 69, and at that point that was an increase of 14.2%. So we're still doing a little better in that jump this year than we did last year. But again, you go back to December 2023 to January 2024, that spike was 66 properties, which at the time was 15.8%. So we're still doing better now than we did the last couple of years. We've got more condos on the market now than we did in January of 2024, but we're not seeing this big ramp up in inventory, at least just yet. I think part of that is a lot of these forced sellers that did end up selling their properties over the last 2 years took enough of the reduction to kind of get those properties moved. And so we've moved a lot of those forced sellers out of the market. And as a result, people are either deciding to hold on to these condos until the market rebounds a little bit, or they're getting aggressive enough to go ahead and get them sold. But 506 total properties on the market. We'll just have to keep an eye on this. The other categories, as we got into October, November, December, the inventory remained low. In some cases, it even went down a little bit farther, and usually we're seeing the inventory start to spike up as we get into November and December. That didn't happen in those categories. It did happen in this category. So in other words, we had a low point this past 12 months of 427 on the market back in September, and then ever since September we've been creeping back up. We had 438 in October, 456 in November, went down a little bit in December, 450, but then we've got our big spike that we always see from December to January back up to the 506 that we've got on the market right now. So we'll continue to keep an eye on condos. I still think there's a tremendous amount of opportunities in condos for folks that want to get a good deal right now, particularly first-time home buyers. I don't think enough first-time home buyers are really looking at the opportunity to get into this real estate market. You can go out there and buy a house for under $100,000, or a condo for under $100,000, like that one we saw at $91,000. If you're a first-time home buyer that's maybe priced out of the single-family home market and you're really kind of sitting on your hands saying, I wish I could get into this real estate market, there's an opportunity in condos. And I'm seeing a lot younger demographics start to get into the condo market because, again, excuse me, you can get a really good deal on a condo right now and start to participate in this inevitable upswing that we're going to be seeing here in the next couple of years or so. So it's something to think about, especially if you're somebody that qualifies for a loan for $150,000. You can go get a decent condo. And again, even though those HOA fees are a little bit higher than they were a couple of years ago, sorry, I'm losing my voice already, talking too much in this report, but even those HOA fees are a little bit higher than they were a couple of years ago. They do cover a lot of things that you would otherwise have to pay with single-family homes, so things like flood insurance, structural insurance. A lot of them pay for water and sewer, so you're talking $120 a month or whatever that's wrapped into your HOA fee. So even though that kind of looks like a lot of money on paper, when you take into consideration everything you're getting for that HOA fee, it makes a little bit more sense. So something to keep in mind. But yeah, condos, they've been struggling more than any other category, and I think that's a result of the inventory issues and the HOA fees being a little bit higher and causing these sellers to be forced to reduce their prices a little bit more. But that wraps up condos and townhomes. Let's get over to vacant residential lots, and then we'll talk about some advice for buyers and sellers, and we'll wrap this thing up. Okay, vacant lots in the city of Cape Coral, vacant residential lots. I'm not talking about commercial lots. And really, I'm going to just focus on non-waterfront lots. I will touch on the different kinds of waterfront lots here at the end of this segment. But for the most part, the majority of the sales that we're seeing are non-waterfront vacant residential lots. So let's get into the numbers, because take a look at this chart for the last 2 years for the number of monthly sales of residential lots. We hit a low point in January. Low point on this 2-year chart. We only sold 38 vacant residential lots last month. As you can see, we've been going down significantly over the last 2 years. It's been very, very consistent, fewer and fewer almost every single month. It spikes up and down a little bit, but the overall trend is pretty evident here. So just to compare this to the last couple of Januaries, January of last year in 2025, we'd sold 87 lots. January of 2024, we sold 96, and that was kind of a low month during that period of time. So we're seeing a lot fewer of these residential sales. I think the entire reason for that is just the fact that the production builders, the D.R. Hortons, the Lennars, these bigger builders that are out there, they aren't building as many new construction homes right now. So as a result, their demand for vacant land has gone down. And they really usually make up a good chunk of the monthly number of vacant residential lot sales. We don't see as many individuals purchasing a lot. We're seeing more of the builders buying up, a dozen, 15 lots or something in any given month, at least back a couple of years ago. Now it's not so much the case. I think the construction costs have remained relatively the same for the last couple of years. And when we've seen some of these price reductions on the resales, it's getting very difficult for the new construction to compete with the resale values. So you can go out there and buy a house that's maybe 4 or 5 years old for quite a bit less than you can go ahead and buy a new construction home or build a new construction home. So as a result, we're just not seeing as many of these vacant residential lot sales. But 38 last month, definitely a low point for the last couple of years. But, in spite of that, let's look at the median price, because median price has been remarkably consistent for the last 2 years. We have not seen really any indication of an upward or downward trajectory at all. There's been some months where we've got some spikes because maybe I think a few more of the more expensive lots sold in the south side of the city versus the north side. Majority of those lot sales, by the way, happen in the northeast and the northwest. The northeast and the northwest just has the most vacant lot left. There's not as many vacant lots available in the southwest and the southeast. And as a result, we don't see as many sales down there in the southern parts of the city. But the median price last month for those 38 sales was $42,500. That's down from the previous month in December of $44,500. But it's been pretty remarkably consistent, about $45,000 for the last 2 years. Last January, the median price was $45,000. The previous January, in January 2024, the median price was $45,000. So we'll probably see this jump back up to those mid-40s again. And it really just depends on the area of the city that you're looking in. Again, the northeast and the northwest, you can find a vacant lot up there for $40,000 or so, maybe low to mid-40s. In the southern areas of the city where the city water and the central water and sewer infrastructure is already in, and a lot of those have the assessments already paid off on it, you're finding vacant off-water lots that are selling closer to $100,000, maybe 90s. So, you know, again, over double really down in the southern parts of the city versus what they're selling for in a lot of the northern parts of the city. So a lot of little nuances there. Depends on, you know, whether or not the central water is already run into where these lots are, and whether or not, if they are, those assessments have already been paid off. But I thought it's pretty interesting that we've just remained really remarkably consistent in spite of demand going way down for the last couple of years. We haven't really seen the pricing. These properties are sitting on the market for longer, but when they're selling for about the same price they did 2 years ago. And I thought that was just really interesting. But let's take a look at the inventory, because in spite of the demand going down, the inventory is it's gone up a little bit, but it's kind of fluctuated a little bit, but it's remained remarkably flat overall. The total, again, this chart going back to December of 2023, January this year, we had 1,033 vacant residential lots on the market. That's up slightly. Again, we got a little bump from December to January. We had 989 on the market in December, so 1,033 on the market now. But again, if you go back 12 months to January 2025, we had 1,007 of these on the market. January 2024, 1,014. So we're pretty much flat. We're pretty much basically where we've been for the last 2 years. We had a period of time there at the end of 2024 and beginning of 2025 where it kind of dipped down and came back up, and we've had a little bit of fluctuation there. But overall, there's not really a trend in either direction, at least in the last couple of years. And as a result, I just think people are just willing to sit on these lots longer until they're getting their number. And right now, they're getting a pretty consistent number from what they were a couple of years ago in terms of the sale values. I did want to touch on Gulf Access and freshwater lots. There aren't very many waterfront lot sales in any given month, so it's not really worth pulling the chart over because the numbers are all over the place. But we did have 16 Gulf Access lot sales this last month. 16 sales at a median price of $245,000, but again, even that price can fluctuate quite a bit. We've seen some Gulf Access vacant lot sales in the 500s in some really top-notch locations, maybe on a Gulf Access lake or something like that. And we've seen certainly some Gulf Access lots get under $200,000. Some of those are a little bit farther from open water and maybe didn't have a seawall in place yet. So they're kind of all over the place. If you're in the Northwest, you can probably plan on somewhere in the twos unless you're really far away without a seawall, and then you're getting under the twos. If you're in the Southwest, you're a little bit closer to the 300 mark, maybe 280, maybe 325 or something like that. So it just depends on where you're at in the city. Again, not as many vacant lots available, Gulf Access lots in the Southwest and Southeast versus the Northwest. There are no Gulf Access lots in the Northeast because there's no Gulf Access property up there. But nevertheless, 16 Gulf Access lot sales at $245,000 median price. And there are 355 available out there. But remarkably, that inventory for Gulf Access lots has been going down for the last couple of years. So It's pretty interesting. The freshwater lots, so the canal front lots that are not Gulf access, the ones that are on the freshwater system, we did see 18 of those sell last month at a median price of $54,000. Again, that $54,000 is likely the pricing that you're going to find in the Northeast or the Northwest versus the Southwest and the Southeast. Down there, you're getting north of $100,000 usually for freshwater lots, maybe even a fair amount more than that if they already have a seawall in them, on them rather. But we had a lot of freshwater lots on the market. 810 were on the market this last month. But you know what? That's been pretty level for the last couple of years. It hasn't really gone up or down. We've got a lot of vacant freshwater lots out there. There are a lot of overpriced lots, especially in the Northeast and the Northwest. They're just sitting out there, not doing anything, sitting there on the market for a long, long time at a list price that's not really realistic. So it makes sense that we're seeing a lot more of the active available freshwater canal lots here, especially in the Northeast and the Northwest. That pretty much wraps it up for all of the categories that we have today, including these vacant lots. So let's go ahead and get over to advice for some buyers, and then I'll do some advice for if you're a seller in this Cape Coral real estate market, and then we'll kind of wrap up with a summary and be done. All right. Okay, so you're a buyer in the Cape Coral real estate market. What is my advice to you? What do you need to be paying attention to? What do you need to be thinking about, as it seems, for all intents and purposes, like this particular market cycle is rounding the corner? Well, the first thing is, if you've been kind of watching these reports for the last couple of years and paying attention to the market and trying to time the bottom, I think we're pretty much there. I think there's plenty of evidence to suggest that we've flattened out in pretty much all the categories. Inventory is considerably down from where it was 2 years ago. When we were sitting on the market 2 years ago, you were strongly in control of this real estate market. You had a ton of choices out there of the different types of properties that you could choose from. And you could kind of pit sellers off of one another and try to negotiate yourself a really good deal. It's not as much the case right now. I still would consider this to be a buyer's market. I still think the inventory is relatively high compared to what maybe an average normal market would be. But we're not too far off from pretty much equilibrium here. And I think that's why you're seeing a flattening out over the last 7 months of the overall pricing. Now, it depends on the category. There's some categories that are where the flattening is a little more evident than others. But nevertheless, I think the last 7 months have been fairly flat when it comes to the overall price. Our demand across the board for all categories has remained relatively consistent over the last couple of years. We've only had really an inventory issue. The reason pricing has gone down the way it has over the last 2 or 3 years is strictly because the inventory has been so high. But now we're seeing some pressure being released off those high inventory numbers, and we're getting a little bit closer to that equilibrium mark. So I think this, again, you want to compare it to an aircraft carrier making a turn. This doesn't happen all at once. By the time you kind of realize that the market has turned, you're usually a few months behind. But from everything that we're seeing now, and if you watch this entire video during all these categories, but particularly just the overall market, it seems like the pricing has kind of leveled off. And what happens next, usually in a normal market cycle, is the prices will start to inevitably go back up. I don't think that's going to happen in the next few months, certainly probably not the next 6 months. But it certainly could happen, especially if we get some interest rate reductions, if some affordability comes back, and certainly if something really weird happens, like they get rid of partial property taxes for everybody in the state of Florida, or for primary residents or something like that. When you're talking about a savings of thousands and thousands of dollars a year, if you are a primary resident, if they do it that way, that's going to get priced out one way or the other in the market. And my guess is it will be priced out in the form of higher prices. Affordability is going to be there, demand's going to go up, and as a result, the market's just going to price that out and probably result in higher real estate values. So should really start looking sooner than later. I think all signs point to this market kind of turning around. I think if you waited another year, 18 months, you might be catching it on the upswing. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's better to buy it on the upswing than it is, when it's tippy top. But nevertheless, if you're looking for that really best deal of this particular market cycle, I think we're about there right now. So still plenty of inventory out there, so you can kind of throw your weight around as a buyer a little bit. particularly for properties that have been on the market a long, long time. If those sellers are realistic, they're gonna deal with you a little bit better. Again, once these properties are priced right, they are selling for pretty darn close to list price. That average right now, if you didn't catch that at the beginning of this video, is 97.2%. So the average property right now is selling for 97.2% of their list price. Now, a lot of those properties may have had to go through some reductions before they got to that price point where they were actually getting some offers on it. But once they're priced right, and if you're looking at a property, and certainly if you're working with me, I'll tell you whether or not that property's priced right. But if you're looking at a property that's priced right, odds are you're going to buy that house for above 97% on average, at least. So we try to do a little bit better than that. We always try to do it, but you know, I've lost a few deals here recently where we've gotten into multiple offer situations where another buyer's kind of snatched that property up from underneath us. So that's happening more and more now versus how much it was happening, you know, a year or two ago. And again, I think that's just another sign that's pointing to this market cycle kind of making a turn here. So if you are a buyer, definitely get a hold of me. I would love to hear about your situation and find out about what you're looking for so I can kind of point you in the right direction. Again, there's a lot of nuances to work through in this Cape Coral real estate market when it comes to being a buyer. There's things like flood insurance, regular insurance. There's things like utilities, central utilities, and the assessments that go along with those, and all of that good stuff. Tax issues to kind of watch out for and things like that. So it's really important that you get a really qualified real estate broker working with you on these things if you're not fully up to speed on all of those issues. And whether it's me or another broker, I certainly would love to help you out. So please give me a call, shoot me a text, shoot me an email, whatever it takes. My contact information is right there. I would love to help you and guide you through the nuances of this process of buying real estate here in the city of Cape Coral. I've been doing it for almost 20 years now, and I like to think I have a pretty good handle on things. So would love to hear from you. Reach out. That's my advice for buyers. We're kind of sitting here at the bottom of this market cycle for all intents and purposes. Everything points to that, and I think if you wait a little bit too long, you're going to catch it on the upswing, which isn't terrible. But now's your opportunity to kind of find this bottom of this market and get yourself the best deal that you're probably going to see for the foreseeable future. So give me a call, text, email, whatever it takes. Love to hear from you. Okay, so if you're a seller in the Cape Coral real estate market, what is my advice to you? What do you need to be paying attention to? What do you need to be looking at as we get into the first quarter of 2026? Well, the good news is, if you've watched this entire report, you've seen for all intents and purposes, it looks like this market cycle is kind of bottoming out. For the last 7 months, at least in the overall market, we've seen prices be remarkably flat. The overall median price, it's gone up and down a little bit, but we're basically right where we were 7 months ago in July. So we've seen this kind of gradual reduction in overall market values go down and then flatten off. And that, to me, coupled with the fact that the inventory has gone down in some cases almost 20% from where we were last year, that indicates to me that we're kind of bottoming out here. This market cycle is flattening off, and inevitably, as long as we don't get into some weird black swan event macroeconomically, eventually those prices will start to go up in the other direction. So if you've been patient as a seller and you held on and you've kind of sat on your property, it's looking like there's some light at the end of the tunnel here, which is great news for you. Now, I still think you have to price your property right. We still have plenty high inventory that's out there on the market right now. So you still need to be smart, and I don't think these values are going to start going up in the other direction anytime soon, certainly probably not in the next 6 months or so. But if we can speed this process up by maybe getting some lower interest rates out there for mortgages, and maybe even something crazy like taking some of the property taxes away or something next year or this year. I certainly think that would speed the process up and get us going in the upward direction in a quicker time frame than it otherwise would. But nevertheless, you've taken some bad news well for the last couple of years. The market's been really kind of taken through its paces, but we didn't see this crash everybody was predicting. I think that was a ridiculous assertion from the get-go. Our demand has remained pretty consistent for the last couple of years. The entire issue has been the inventory, which was just a normal market forced reaction of having a lack of inventory back and coming out of the pandemic in 2020. That's why our prices went up so quickly. We needed something to cool that market off. The extra inventory flowed in. Our demand kind of waned a little bit as we got into 2022, and certainly with the hurricane at the end of 2022, that kind of slowed things down a little bit, and that inventory kind of shot up on us. And as a result, that's why we've seen this market correction. So it absolutely needed to happen. It's a healthy thing that it happened over the course of a couple of years versus all at once. And but now it seems like there's some light at the end of the tunnel and around in the corner. If you do need to sell right now, the most important thing you can do is just get that property valued right, get it priced right. You still has to be looking top notch, especially that drive up, that first drive up when buyers are pulling in the driveway, and the first 5 seconds of walking through the front door. It's most crucial because they're going to decide whether or not they have a positive or a negative view of your house in that first 5 seconds of walking through the front door. And once they have that initial reaction, it's very, very difficult to turn them in a positive direction if that first 5 seconds is a negative one. So make sure it looks good, make sure it smells good, make sure that drive up is tippy top. You got the curb appeal going on it. And if you need some help pricing your property, I would certainly love to hear from you. I would love to hear about your individual property and kind of take you through the paces, take you through the numbers of what it's going to take to sell that property. That way you can make an educated decision as to whether or not it's a good time to go ahead and sell that property, or if maybe you can hold on for another year or 2 years, because I think values, certainly by 2 years, will probably be in the other direction. We'll probably be doing a little bit better. I don't think they're going to go all the way back to where they were at the end of 2021 and 2022, all at once at least. We'll get there eventually, but at the very least, we'll start to see some positive increase on the overall median prices here, hopefully within the next year, but certainly probably the next 2 years. So get a hold of me. Would love to hear from you. Love to hear about your property. Call, text, or email me. My contact information is right there on the screen. Like to think I have a pretty good handle on this real estate market. Still selling a lot of property for people. The listings that I have out there, there are some that are a little bit more difficult than others, but we're still doing a pretty good job of getting these properties moved as long as they're priced right and as long as they look really good, and we can still be competitive with the others that are out there. So give me a call, shoot me a text, shoot me an email. Would love to hear from you. That's my advice for sellers. If you can afford to hang on for another year or two, you're going to be in a little bit better shape. If you do need to sell now, it's very important that you price your property right. If you need some help with that, would love to hear from you. But that's my advice for sellers right now in January, or February actually, of 2026. All right, so let me summarize the Cape Coral real estate market as it sits right now here in February of 2026. If you didn't want to go through that hour plus of content that I just provided for you, what's the kind of summary of everything? What's the breakdown? Well, the biggest thing right now, the biggest takeaway is pricing overall has been relatively flat for the last 7 months, and we've taken a tremendous amount of inventory off the market in the last year. Our demand for property, the number of properties that we're actually selling has remained really consistent, although in 2025 in some categories we sold more properties last year in 2025 than we did in 2024 and 2023. So we hadn't had really a demand problem that much. It's really been an inventory issue, and we've taken in some categories as much as 20+% off the market from where we were sitting this time last year. And across the board in all the categories, the normal jump that we see in inventory from December to January as we're getting into our main busy season of the first 6 months of the year, that main bump that we see in inventory from December to January has really been muted this year. We did not see nearly the increase that we normally see in previous years, at least the last couple of years, from 2023 to 2024 and from 2024 to 2025. So all signs are pointing to we're kind of rounding the corner on this real estate market. Pricing is flattened off. The inventory is getting down to a more manageable level. We still got a little bit ways to go on that, and it's going to be interesting to see how many sales we actually get on the board here as we get into our main buying season, especially in categories like condos and Gulf access homes, where we see the highest number of sales in March, April, May. So that'll be really telling in terms of how fast we turn this thing around. But for all intents and purposes, it looks like this market cycle is bottomed out, and it's going to be starting to the upclimb sooner than later. I don't think we're going to see prices increase all that rapidly, at least in the next 6 months or so. But certainly in the next year and certainly the next 2 years, we will inevitably start to see those prices start to increase. There are some factors that could speed that up. If we get some relief on the interest rates on the mortgages, that could help things out tremendously. One of the biggest things, one of the quickest turnarounds that we could see is if the state government does in fact successfully get rid of property taxes, at least for primary residents. I think that's a huge savings to a lot of folks that would be buying real estate here in Southwest Florida. And those savings that you're going to see means more affordability. They can afford a higher price now because their payments are not going to include, in some cases, $6,000, $7,000, maybe more in taxes every year. And that's going to get priced out in the market one way or the other. So if they get that done, I really expect to see these values start to go up rather quickly as the market kind of prices that out. But nevertheless, it's a positive sign if you are a seller right now. At least we have some light at the end of the tunnel. It was pretty bleak there for the last couple of years as we watched, especially early last year when these inventory numbers hit record highs. We've luckily taken a lot of that inventory off the market, and we're getting back to levels that we haven't seen in the last 2 years. So we're doing well. We need a little bit more. We got a little bit more to go, at least in this market cycle, but I think overall prices will probably be fairly flat depending on the category for the next 6 months, and then we may start to see them tick up. We'll just have to kind of keep an eye on things. Certainly tune into this market report every single month. I'll keep you up to speed on everything that's going on, and you can be staying right on top of these numbers. I think that puts you at a tremendous advantage if you're a buyer or a seller in this Cape Coral real estate market. So if you are a buyer or a seller, I would love to hear from you. Certainly my contact information is right on the screen. It's also down in the description of this video. You can call, text, or email me anytime. I would love to hear your individual situation and tell you how I can help you out, whether you're a buyer or seller. I'm working with a lot of both these days, and we're finding some success in this real estate market in either situation. So would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for being here. If you're not subscribed, make sure you subscribe. And I'll see you in the next video here in just a few days. Again, I do one of these videos every month, but these are in addition to the weekly videos I put out where we're just looking at some really fun real estate or covering some really useful information. So whatever describes you, whether you're a buyer or seller, you're just somebody that's kind of paying attention to the market, make sure you hit the subscribe button so you can be there. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it was useful to you. And if it was, do me a favor, hit the like button because it just helps me out, helps the channel out. And yeah, I would love to hear from you. If you are in the real estate market, give me a call, text, email, whatever it takes. But thanks for being here. I'll see you in the next video soon.
Like and subscribe. Just kidding.